In 36 years on this bench, I have seen a lot of people walk through that door wearing their confidence like a coat. Some of them earned that confidence. Some of them borrowed it from a title. And some of them, every once in a while, walked in so sure of themselves that they didn't notice what was sitting in the file on my desk. The thing that was about to change everything. This is the story of one of those mornings. And I want to tell you right now, before we go any further, that what broke through that man's armor was not my words, it was his father's. If you believe that the people who hold power in our communities should be held to the highest standard of character, not the lowest, subscribe to this channel right now, because what happened in my courtroom that Wednesday will stay with me for the rest of my life. The morning started cold, January cold. The kind that gets into the building and stays, even with the heat running. People in the gallery were still wearing their coats. I could see their breath in little clouds when they whispered to each other. I always look out at the gallery before I begin. A young woman with a thick folder of papers on her lap, going through them one more time, like studying for an exam. An older gentleman in a work shirt with paint on the cuffs. A man in his 30s bouncing one knee nervously, staring at the floor. Ordinary people, dealing with ordinary troubles the best way they knew how. I settled in. Inspector Reyes called the docket. The first few cases moved through. I listened. I asked questions. I tried to see each person clearly. That is the work. And then Officer Reyes called the next name. Director Bernard Ashby. Director. The title moved through the room the way titles do. People sat up. Heads turned. A few exchanged glances. Because when a title like that shows up in municipal court, everyone wants to see what happens next. Bernard Ashby was 55 years old, Director of Public Works for the City of Providence, 17 years in the position. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of face that was used to being listened to. He came in wearing a dark overcoat, dress shirt, no tie. He moved through the room with the unhurried steps of a man who had never been made to wait. He reached the podium. He did not say good morning. He placed both hands on the rail, looked up at me and said, "Let's get this handled. I've got a 9 o'clock. I looked at him for a moment. "Good morning, Mr. Ashby." Something in my tone made him recalibrate, just slightly, but he held his ground. "Morning," he said. "Do you understand why you're here today?" He gave a short exhale through his nose. "Patient. Barely. Parking matters. Yes, I'm aware. Whatever the number is, I'll write a check before I leave the building." In the gallery, someone shifted in their seat. The young woman with the folder stopped turning pages. I opened the file. 3 citations, all unpaid. No appearance at the original hearing date. The first, parking in a no-stopping zone on Prescott Avenue during a road construction closure. His personal vehicle had blocked a lane for 40 minutes, forcing construction workers to redirect traffic manually through an active work zone. "Mr. Ashby," I said, "do you remember this one?" "Vaguely," he said. "I was heading to a site meeting." The construction crew's log notes that 2 workers had to step into traffic to direct around your vehicle for 40 minutes. I didn't ask them to do that. "No," I said. "They did it because there was no other option. You created the situation and left. They managed it." He showed no reaction, just mild impatience. The second citation, parking across 2 accessible spaces in the lot at Providence City Hall. His vehicle had no accessible placard. Duration, 1 hour and 12 minutes. "Mr. Ashby, I know," he said. "I know what you're going to say. It was a quick trip in. I misjudged the time. 1 hour and 12 minutes. I said I misjudged." I looked at him steadily. 3 people who used those spaces filed complaints with the parking authority that day. One of them, a woman with a mobility device, states she circled that lot for 20 minutes before finding an alternative parking area 2 blocks away. She was late to a meeting with our city housing department. He said nothing. "She was applying for housing assistance," I added, "and she was late because you were parked in her space for over an hour." He looked away briefly, then back. "I'll pay for it." Yes, I said, you will. The third citation was the failure to appear, which had added penalties and brought the total to $1,140. You received 2 notices, I said. Neither was responded to. I have a staff that handles administrative matters. Things fall through. This is not an administrative matter, Mr. Ashby. This is a legal summons. It does not fall through. It waits. He looked at me with the expression of a man who was working very hard to appear more reasonable than he felt. Judge, I apologize for the inconvenience, but I am a very busy man running a department of 300 people. I oversee every road, every bridge, every public infrastructure project in this city. Can we agree that my time has some value and move this along? The gallery was quiet, but it was not an empty quiet. It was full of people listening carefully, measuring every word against their own experience of this city, this system, and the people who run it. I have sat in this chair for 36 years. I have developed a deep respect for that gallery. Those are the people the city is for, not the people with offices and titles, the people with folders on their laps and paint on their sleeves and bouncing knees. And they were watching Bernard Ashby tell me his time had value, as if the construction worker stepping into traffic did not, as if the woman circling a parking lot with a mobility device did not. Mr. Ashby, I said, and I kept my voice completely even. Everyone's time has value. The question before this court is not whose time matters. The question is whether the laws that apply to the people of this city also apply to the people who run it. He looked at me without answering. Based on what I've seen this morning, I continued, you believe they do not. I'd like to understand why. I don't believe that, he said. Careful now. Then why have 3 violations gone unaddressed for 7 months? I told you, things fell through. Things, I repeated. Administrative matters. Mr. Ashby, I set down my pen. A summons from this court is not a thing. It is a legal document issued in the name of the people of Providence, the same people whose roads you oversee, the same people who sat in that parking lot trying to get into a city building to ask for help. He pressed his lips together. And that was when I turned to the last page of the file. It was a letter, single page, typed, on personal stationery, filed with the parking authority 3 weeks earlier and forwarded to my clerk. The name at the top was Harold Ashby. I looked up. Mr. Ashby, is your father's name Harold? Something moved across his face, fast, gone almost immediately, but I saw it. Yes. Does he live in Providence? A pause. Longer. He lives on Prescott Avenue. I let that sit for exactly 1 second. Prescott Avenue, I said. That is where your first citation was issued, during the road construction closure. He said nothing. Your father filed this letter, I said. He lives on that block. He is 78 years old. He uses a cane following a knee replacement. Bernard Ashby's posture changed. It was subtle, but it was there. The shoulder shifted, the chin came down, just slightly. I began to read. To whom it may concern, I am writing about a vehicle that blocked Prescott Avenue on November 14th during the construction work on our block. I recognize this vehicle. It belongs to my son Bernard. I have not mentioned this to him directly because I am not sure he would understand why I am upset, and I am not sure I have the words to explain it to him in a way that would reach him. So I am writing this letter to whoever handles these matters in hopes that someone will. I paused. Bernard Ashby was completely still. I continued. I am a retired city employee. I worked for the sanitation department for 31 years. I know what it means to be a worker on a city street. I watched those men that day, young men in orange vests, stepping out between moving cars because a vehicle was blocking their zone. One of them nearly got clipped by a truck making a turn. I watched from my window. I knew whose car it was, and I sat there ashamed. The gallery was absolutely silent. I read the final paragraph. I raised my son to understand that a title is not a pass. His grandfather worked on the docks. I drove garbage trucks. We were not important men by most measures, but we never believed our convenience was worth more than another person's safety. I don't know what happened to Bernard. I don't know when he forgot where he came from. I am writing this because I love him, and I do not know how else to reach him. I hope whoever reads this can do what I cannot. Sincerely, Harold Ashby. I set the letter down. I looked at Bernard Ashby. He was not the same man who had walked into my courtroom 20 minutes earlier. That man had been certain, had been slightly amused by the inconvenience of being here, had been managing the situation the way he managed everything, with the confidence of someone who expects the world to accommodate him. This man was standing very still, with wet eyes and a jaw working silently, trying to hold himself together in a room full of strangers. I gave him a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. He wrote that? Yes. My father actually wrote that to the court. He did, 3 weeks ago. He pressed one hand flat on the podium rail, steadying himself. He never said anything to me. He explains why in the letter. Bernard Ashby looked down, not in defiance, in the way a person looks down when they are trying to process something that does not fit inside the space they thought they had. His grandfather worked the docks, he said quietly, almost to himself. Yes, my grandfather. I used to sit with him when I was little. He had hands like... He stopped, swallowed. He used to tell me that the men who built this city never had their names on anything, but the city stood because of them. That's right, I said gently, and I'm blocking their streets. He said it himself. I did not have to say it. I want to tell you something about moments like this one. There is a version of justice that is purely mechanical. Violation occurs, fine is assessed, payment is made, case is closed. And that version has its place. The law needs consistency. Without it, everything becomes negotiable, and nothing is fair. But there is another version of justice, the kind that asks, what does this person actually need to understand in order to change? What consequence will reach them in the place where change is possible? Bernard Ashby did not need a larger fine. He had just told me he would write a check on his way out. The money meant nothing to him. What he needed was his father's letter, read aloud, in a room he could not leave, in front of people who had waited in that parking lot and stepped into that street. That was already happening. I had not planned it, but that is what was happening. And now it was my job to decide what came next. Mr. Ashby, I said, I want to ask you something. He looked up at me. When did you last visit your father? A long pause. Thanksgiving, he said, 4 months ago. He is 78 years old, uses a cane, and lives on a block that is currently under road construction. And you last saw him 4 months ago. He closed his eyes briefly. I know, he said. I know. Does he know what you do? Does he follow your work? He reads the paper. He knows. A pause. He used to be proud. Used to be, I repeated quietly. He nodded. Just once. The letter says he loves you, I said. It also says he doesn't know how to reach you. A man of 78 who worked 31 years for this city, sitting at his window watching construction workers step into traffic around his son's car and feeling ashamed. That is not a small thing, Mr. Ashby. No, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. It isn't. The prosecutor, a young woman named Claire D'Souza, had been sitting with her folder closed for the past 10 minutes. She stood briefly. Your Honor, given the pattern of violations and the failure to appear, the city requests full penalties. I nodded. Full penalties will be imposed. I looked back at Mr. Ashby. The total of $1,140 will be paid in full. No reduction, no special arrangement. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor. Additionally, you will complete 75 hours of community service. Specifically, you will work alongside your department's road crew on active construction projects, not in a supervisory capacity, as a laborer. You will wear the vest, you will hold the signs, you will stand in the street and direct traffic, and you will understand what it costs those men to do that work every day. He was nodding, slowly, steadily. Yes, you will also meet with the accessibility coordinator in your department. Within 30 days, you will implement a review of accessible parking at all city facilities. You will personally sign off on it. Your name will be attached to any improvements that result. Yes, Your Honor. And you will go see your father this week, not to explain yourself, not to discuss the letter, just to sit with him, take him dinner, let him talk. Can you do that? He pressed his lips together hard, holding something back. Yes, he said. Good. I paused. Mr. Ashby, your grandfather built this city with his hands and never had his name on anything. Your father drove a truck for 31 years so this city's streets stayed clean. They gave you a path that got you to a director's office. The question you need to sit with is whether you have been walking that path in a way they would recognize. He nodded. Not the brisk managerial nod from when he first walked in, a slow, honest one. I haven't been, he said. I know I haven't. Then now is the time to change that. Not because I'm ordering you to, because your father is 78 years old and he still loves you enough to write a letter to a stranger, hoping someone could reach you. Bernard Ashby's face finally gave way. It was not dramatic. He did not sob. He was a composed man, and he stayed composed. But his eyes filled, and he blinked, and for a moment he looked exactly like what he was. A boy from Providence who had climbed a long way and lost his footing somewhere on the way up. I'll go this week, he said. I'll go tonight. He came back 60 days later. He looked different, not younger exactly, but less armored. He was dressed more plainly. He walked without the studied authority he had carried in before. He looked like a man who had been thinking. Inspector Reyes handed me the documentation, fine paid, 75 hours of community service completed. The accessibility review had been submitted to the city, signed, as required, by Bernard Ashby, Director of Public Works. I looked over the service report from the road crew supervisor. It was brief but specific. Mr. Ashby worked without complaint. He showed up on time every morning. By the third week, the crew stopped treating him like a visitor. He learned their names. He remembered their names the following week. That's not nothing. I set the report down. Mr. Ashby, how was your father? He took a breath. I went to see him that night, like I said I would. I brought food from the Italian place he's always liked. We sat at his kitchen table for 3 hours. He paused. He didn't mention the letter. I didn't either. We just talked about the neighborhood, about my grandfather, about things I hadn't thought about in years. How did that feel? Like something coming back. He looked at me. I don't have a better way to put it. Like something I had let go of a long time ago and didn't realize I was missing. Did you tell him about the community service? A small, quiet smile. He already knew. Apparently, one of the crew members lives 2 blocks from him. Small city. He shook his head. He didn't say much. Just nodded and said, good. That's all. Just good. But from him, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I received a note from him, I said. Ashby looked up quickly. He sent a handwritten note to my clerk. Just a few lines. I picked it up and read it. Judge Caprio, I don't know if you remember my letter. I wanted to let you know that Bernard came home. Not just to visit. He came home. That's all I was asking for. Thank you for listening to an old man, Harold Ashby. Bernard Ashby pressed the back of his hand to his mouth for a moment. Then he collected himself. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, I told him. Thank your father. He's the one who knew what you needed. After he left, I sat quietly for a few minutes. I thought about Harold Ashby, sitting at his window on Prescott Avenue, 78 years old, 31 years of service to this city, watching a construction worker step into traffic to move around his son's car. And instead of calling Bernard and starting a fight, he sat down and wrote a letter, calm and honest and full of love, to a stranger because he believed someone would read it and care. He was right. That is something I want to hold on to. The faith of a father that decency still exists in the systems his son helps to run. The belief that a letter written simply and honestly could reach someone who had stopped being reachable by ordinary means. My father had that same quality. He believed in the goodness of institutions, not blindly, but genuinely. He believed that if you put the truth in front of someone with the authority to act on it, more often than not, they would. I have tried to honor that belief for 36 years. Some days it is harder than others. Some mornings the people who walk through that door are so sealed inside their own importance that you wonder if anything can get through. And then a letter appears in a file, and everything changes. Power is a strange thing. It starts for most people as a goal, something they work toward because they want to make a difference, provide for their family, prove something to themselves. And then slowly, if you are not careful, it becomes something else. It becomes comfort, distance, a buffer between you and the ordinary friction of life that everyone else still feels every day. You stop waiting in lines. You stop noticing the people who hold doors. You stop looking at construction workers the way you looked at them when your grandfather was one. And you forget. Not all at once, gradually, painlessly. That is the danger of power without accountability. Bernard Ashby had not become a bad man. He had become an inattentive one, which can look the same from the outside, but is a very different thing on the inside. Because an inattentive person can still be reached, can still be returned to themselves. His father knew that. His father had known it long before I did. All it took was someone willing to read the letter out loud. I think about Harold Ashby often, a man I have never met, who spent 31 years driving a truck so this city would be clean in the morning, who raised a son and watched him rise and then watched him drift, and loved him enough to do something about it. That is not a small thing. That is one of the larger things I have ever witnessed from this bench. If there is someone in your life you have been too busy for, call them today, not next week. Today, not a text, a call. Sit with them the way you would want to be sat with. And if you are in a position of any authority, any power at all, remember where you came from. Remember the people who made you possible, because the moment you forget them is the moment you begin to lose the best part of yourself. A title is not a measure of character. What you do with it is. God bless you. Take care of each other. And if this story reached you today, pass it along to someone who might need to hear it.